A single beam of sunlight once a year reveals a secret locked in stone. This was no accident. Ancient architects across the globe mastered a silent language, designing monuments with pinpoint accuracy to capture the sun's most dramatic moments. We are going to decode that language. By the end of this journey, you will never look at the world's ancient wonders the same way again. We will uncover how builders without modern tools achieved such impossible precision, and why they wove their myths and power into alignments with the solstice sun. What forgotten connection to the cosmos did our ancestors build into the very ground beneath our feet? Their world was written in the sky long before it was carved in stone. For those first communities, the sun was not just a source of light and warmth, it was the ultimate authority. Its daily arc marked the hours, but its shifting position along the horizon told a far more vital story. Would the warmth return? When would the herds migrate? When must the seeds be sown? Survival itself depended on reading these celestial signs with absolute accuracy. This was not a matter of philosophy, but of life and death. Out of that urgent, practical need, observation was born. Someone, somewhere, noticed that the sun rose from a certain notch in the hills at the height of summer and set behind a distant peak at the winter's depth. They began to mark those spots with a single standing stone, a pile of rocks, a notch carved into a tree. These were humanity's first silent agreements with the cosmos, a way of saying, we see the pattern. We remember. This simple act of marking transformed the sun's journey from a mystery into a calendar. It created a fixed point in a fluid world, a promise of return. And with that promise, something profound shifted. The awe they felt watching a crimson dawn was no longer just fear of the unknown. It was the beginning of understanding. That primal need to predict merged with a deepening sense of reverence. The sun's reliable cycles suggested a kind of cosmic order, a rhythm that their own lives could mirror. So those first markers became more than just practical tools, they became sacred sites. A stone that caught the solstice sunrise was not just pointing to a date, it was capturing a moment of celestial power, a time when the veil between the earthly and the divine felt thinnest. This fusion of necessity and spirituality is the bedrock of everything that followed. Before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, there was a single human being placing one stone in line with a distant mountain, silently forging the first link in a chain of knowledge that would stretch for millennia. That humble act set a precedent, establishing the core purpose for all the monumental architecture to come, to make the invisible rhythms of the universe permanently, visibly, sacredly clear. The leap from a single marker to a monumental alignment required a new kind of genius, one born of patient observation and clever adaptation. We must set aside our modern assumptions, for their toolkit contained no lasers, no satellites, no digital calculations. Their precision was carved from the landscape itself, using instruments of elegant simplicity. At the heart of it all was the Gnomon, a simple vertical rod stuck into the ground. Its purpose was humble, to cast a shadow, but to the trained eye that moving shadow was a dynamic clock and calendar, tracing a silent, daily story across the earth. By marking the tip of that shadow at the same time each day, perhaps at noon, an observer would see it draw a complex curve over the seasons, its path growing longer, then shorter, then longer again. The 2 points where that shadow reached its absolute longest and shortest extremes marked the winter and summer solstices with unwavering accuracy. This was not magic, it was geometry written in sunlight, a fundamental truth anyone could verify with a stick and a flat patch of ground. But to fix that celestial moment into a temple wall or a gateway required scaling up this principle dramatically. This is where the landscape itself became the instrument. The method of foresights and backsights transformed entire horizons into a giant measuring device. Imagine a builder standing at a chosen point, a backsite, perhaps a carved stone or a post. They would look across a vast distance toward a natural foresight, a distinctive notch between two hills or a lone, distant peak. By patiently waiting for the day when the rising or setting sun perfectly kissed that notch, they could declare, "This is the line." Then they would build their permanent structure along that exact line of sight, embedding that celestial event into architecture for all time. This technique turned mountains and valleys into the fixed points of a cosmic protractor. Their toolkit was rounded out by other elegantly simple solutions. String, stretched taut, provided a perfectly straight line over long distances. Water, finding its own level in a trench or a simple trough, gave them a reliable horizontal reference to ensure their platforms and foundations were true. But the most crucial component was intangible, a deep generational patience. Knowledge was not held by one person but passed down, refined over decades and centuries. A priest might spend a lifetime verifying a solstice alignment started by his grandfather, adding minute corrections for future generations. This long-term, collective observation was their true superpower. It reveals that their greatest technology was not made of bronze or stone, but of watched sunrises, recorded shadows, and an unwavering commitment to listening to the sky. This binary rhythm of light and shadow became the heartbeat of their calendar, etched not on parchment, but in the very pathways of their greatest buildings. To align with the solstices was to build a conversation with time itself. The summer solstice, the year's longest day, represented the sun at its full power, a moment of triumph for light and life. Conversely, the winter solstice, the shortest day, marked the sun's lowest ebb, a time of deep introspection and the promise of light's eventual return. Capturing these two extremes required architectural genius. A common design was the solar corridor, a long, narrow passage oriented with such precision that for only a few minutes on the summer solstice, the rising sun would fire a beam of light directly down its length, illuminating an inner sanctuary or striking a carved altar stone. On the winter solstice, the setting sun might perform a mirror image, flooding the same space from the opposite direction. This created a perfect, year-long pendulum swing of illumination, a binary solar calendar in stone. The effect was undeniable, a public demonstration of the priest's or ruler's sacred knowledge, proving they could command the sun's attention on its most important days. But the meaning ran far deeper than mere spectacle. This architectural dialogue embodied a profound understanding of cosmic balance. The eternal dance between the expanding light of summer and the retreating dark of winter was not seen as a battle with a winner, but as a necessary, harmonious cycle. One could not exist without the other. The solstice alignments made this philosophical truth physically manifest, year after year, connecting the community's rituals of planting and harvest to the grand, unwavering order of the cosmos. To stand in that corridor as the solstice sun arrived was to feel personally connected to that eternal rhythm. This principle is the master key to deciphering sites across the globe, from the depths of a Newgrange passage tomb to the grand gates of an Egyptian temple. When we find a structure perfectly aligned to a solstice sunrise, we are not just finding an ancient calendar, we are witnessing a permanent statement about balance, renewal, and humanity's place within a living, breathing universe. The principles of solstice alignment find their most iconic expression on the windswept Salisbury Plain. Stonehenge is not a random collection of massive stones. It is a Neolithic computer engineered from sarsen and bluestone, its primary language written in sunlight. While scholars debate its many layers of meaning, one fact is etched into its geometry. The central axis of the monument points directly to the midsummer sunrise in one direction and the midwinter sunset in the opposite. This was a deliberate, breathtaking act of architectural intention. To understand how it worked, we must step into the center of the circle on a summer solstice dawn. Looking northeast past the great archways of the trilithons, your gaze would be drawn to a solitary, weathered stone standing guard outside the main ring, the heel stone. As the first sliver of sun breaks the horizon, it does not appear just anywhere. It rises precisely over the tip of that distant marker. The heel stone acts as a perfect foresight, a celestial gun sight for the entire monument. The builders did not stop there. They shaped and positioned the massive uprights and lintels to create framed windows and narrow corridors. These stone apertures would have funneled the solstice light, transforming a simple sunrise into a dramatic, staged performance of illumination. For a dispersed Neolithic community, gathering at this appointed time was more than a ceremony. It was a reaffirmation of cosmic order. Watching the sun obey the architecture they had labored for generations to build would have been a profound demonstration of shared knowledge and collective power. It united them under the witnessed promise that the cycle would continue, that the light would return after the depth of winter. Stonehenge stands as a masterclass in turning landscape and stone into a permanent clock, a communal anchor point in the flowing river of the year. But to achieve such precision on a truly imperial scale, we must journey to the banks of the Nile. Here, the ancient architects took the simple principle of the Gnomon and transformed it into a statement of eternal power. The Egyptian obelisk was a sundial carved from a single mountain. These towering, needle-like monuments, sometimes sheathed in a dazzling alloy of gold and silver to blaze like captured sunlight, were not just symbols. They were functional instruments of celestial timekeeping on a breathtaking scale. Their placement within vast temple complexes like Karnak was an act of meticulous cosmic choreography. Each obelisk was positioned so its long, sweeping shadow would become a moving finger of the gods. On specific, hallowed days, perhaps the anniversary of a pharaoh's reign or a festival dedicated to Ra, the sun god, that shadow would travel across the sacred pavement to touch a particular altar, kiss the feet of a divine statue, or mark a ceremonial gateway. This transformed the entire temple precinct into a dynamic solar clock. The sun itself was recruited to perform the ritual, illuminating spaces in a strict, preordained sequence dictated by stone and shadow. It was a daily, silent reaffirmation that the pharaoh's rule was in direct harmony with the cosmos, that his monuments could command the very passage of time. This seamless weaving of solar mechanics into the fabric of religious and state ceremony shows us that for these cultures, astronomy was never a separate science. It was the foundation of their identity, their power, and their connection to the divine. While Stonehenge and Karnak celebrated the sun's power in open, communal spaces, another culture chose to channel its most hopeful light into a place of profound quiet. In Ireland's Boyne Valley, a massive grass-covered mound rises from the earth, a structure older than the pyramids of Giza. This is Newgrange, a passage tomb built over 5,000 years ago. From the outside, it appears as a great, silent hill, but its entrance holds a subtle clue, a small, rectangular opening set high above the doorway known as the roof box. This unassuming window is the key to one of the ancient world's most precise and poignant solar alignments. For just a few precious minutes around dawn on the winter solstice, and for a handful of days on either side, a miraculous event occurs. As the sun crests the horizon on that shortest day, a single, narrow beam of light enters that roof box. It does not flood the entrance. Instead, it travels with perfect focus down the long, 19-meter passageway, a corridor built with such care that not a single stone blocks its path. The beam grows as it moves, finally spilling into the central chamber deep within the heart of the mound, a space built to hold the remains of the community's ancestors. For those minutes, the deepest dark is pierced by the year's most hopeful light. The engineering required for this is staggering. The passage had to be oriented with pinpoint accuracy, and the roof box itself is a masterpiece of stonework designed to admit only a specific sliver of sunlight at a very specific solar altitude. This was no happy accident, it was a breathtaking feat of intention. The meaning woven into this alignment is profoundly different from the public ceremonies of other sites. This was a private, symbolic reunion. At the year's darkest hour, when the sun seemed weakest, the builders orchestrated a moment where it reached its furthest point inward, to touch the resting place of those who had passed. It transformed the chamber from a tomb into a womb of light, a powerful narrative of rebirth engineered directly into the landscape. The message was clear: even in death, the cycle continues, the light returns, and the community remains connected to its past and its future through this silent, annual promise written in stone and sunlight. Far from the monolithic stones of Europe, a different kind of solar architecture emerged from the very cliffs themselves. High on the Colorado Plateau, the ancestral pueblones of Mesa Verde did not build to dominate their landscape, but to converse with it. Their masterpiece of celestial observation is the Sun Temple, a mysterious D-shaped structure perched on a mesa top. Unlike the towering chambers of Newgrange or the grand avenues of Karnak, this temple has no roof. Its walls enclose an open space, a deliberate choice that turns the entire building into a colossal sundial. Within its precisely laid stonework, small, strategic windows were carved. On the morning of the summer solstice, a sliver of sunlight would pass through one of these openings, not to flood the space, but to paint a focused spot of light onto a specific niche in the opposite wall. This was not a public spectacle for thousands, but a quiet, exact signal for the community's keepers of time. Other apertures and the cast shadows of the walls themselves marked the equinoxes and the winter solstice with similar precision. This elegant system transformed the temple from a mere building into a functioning stone calendar. For a people whose survival depended on knowing exactly when the last frost had passed and the first monsoon rains would arrive, this solar knowledge was everything. The alignment told them when to plant corn in the canyon bottoms, when to harvest piñon nuts, and when to gather for the ceremonies that maintained balance with the world. The Sun Temple demonstrates a beautifully localized adaptation of universal principles. These architects used the clear, high desert light and the fixed geometry of their own masonry to solve the perennial human problem of marking time, grounding their ritual and agricultural life in the reliable cycles of the sun. Their legacy is a reminder that this celestial language was not owned by one culture, but was a shared human discovery, written in whatever materials a people had at hand. The sun's journey holds more than just moments of peak power. Between the solstices lies another sacred point in the year, a fleeting instant of perfect equilibrium. This is the equinox, when day and night stand in equal measure across the entire planet. For cultures that saw the universe as a system of opposing forces, this was not just a date, it was a profound philosophical statement made real. Capturing this ephemeral balance in stone required a different kind of architectural poetry, one of symmetry and shadow. While a solstice alignment celebrates the sun at its furthest reach, an equinox alignment honors its precise center. The goal was often to demonstrate perfect east-west orientation, a line that declared a sacred balance between light and dark, life and rest, summer and winter. A common design strategy was to create a central axis. On the morning of an equinox, the rising sun would fire a beam directly down that axis, illuminating both halves of a temple or courtyard with equal light, a physical manifestation of cosmic fairness. In other designs, a carefully positioned pillar or spire would cast a shadow that fell exactly along a north-south line at solar noon, bisecting a plaza or a ceremonial design with geometric perfection. These moments turned architecture into a dynamic proof of concept, a yearly demonstration that the universe operated on principles of harmony. Rituals held at these times were often about renewal, planting, or reaffirming social order, aligning human activity with this perceived moment of universal balance. Finding these markers requires a subtler eye than spotting a solstice alignment. They speak not in dramatic extremes, but in quiet, mathematical certainty, a testament to the ancient architect's desire to map not just the sun's limits, but its point of perfect poise. Yet the mastery of these ancient builders reached its most spectacular form in a place where astronomy became pure theater. At the great Mayan city of Chichen Itza, the pyramid known as El Castillo stands as a silent testament to a genius that merged stone, shadow, and story into a single, breathtaking moment. The structure is a precise calendar in itself, with 4 stairways of 91 steps each, adding up to 364, plus the platform at the top completing the solar year. But its true magic is reserved for the equinoxes, as the sun begins its descent on those 2 days of perfect balance in spring and autumn. A calculated transformation occurs. The late afternoon light strikes the northwest corner of the pyramid with surgical precision. This angle casts a series of 7 distinct, triangular shadows down the balustrade of the main staircase. These shadows are not random. They are engineered to align perfectly with the massive stone serpent heads carved at the base of the stairs. As the sun sinks lower, the interplay of light and dark creates an undulating, diamond-backed body connecting the shadows to the heads. For about 45 minutes, the illusion is complete. A giant feathered serpent appears to slither down from the heavens and crawl into the earth. This was the embodiment of Kukulkan, the plumed serpent deity who brought knowledge, the calendar, and life-giving rains to the Maya. The effect is a staggering fusion of disciplines. It required profound astronomical knowledge to align the entire pyramid to capture the sun at that exact angle on those exact days. It demanded advanced geometry to calculate the stairway's incline and the balustrade's profile to produce the specific shadow shapes, and it wove this hard science seamlessly into the heart of Mayan mythology and political power. For the gathered populace, this was not a trick of the light. It was a divine visitation, a public demonstration that their ruler and their priests could summon the god itself on the days of cosmic equilibrium. It transformed a static temple into a dynamic, living icon, proving that the celestial order and the social order were one and the same. This spectacle represents the pinnacle of symbolic solar design, where an architect's calculations created not just a marker, but a moment of shared, awe-inspiring belief, forever etched into the memory of a civilization. Yet not all solar dialogues were grand public spectacles. Some were quiet, intimate conversations held at the very roof of the world. High in the Andes, the Inca city of Machu Picchu clings to a mountain ridge, a masterpiece of stonework seemingly fused with the living rock. And at its highest sacred point, we find a different kind of solar instrument, one that feels less like a temple and more like a tool for a personal audience with the cosmos. This is the Intihuatana stone, a single, exquisitely carved granite pillar rising from a massive ritual table. Its name translates directly and poetically as the place to which the sun is tied, or more commonly, the hitching post of the sun. The design is deceptively simple, but its purpose reveals a profound and urgent worldview. The pillar was not aligned to a sunrise or a sunset, but to the sun's highest point in the sky. During the equinoxes, when day and night are in perfect balance, the sun would stand almost directly overhead at noon. At that precise moment, the intricately shaped pillar would cast no shadow at all. It would simply disappear into its own footprint, a stone becoming one with the light. For the Inca, this was not just an interesting optical effect, it was a moment of critical cosmic maintenance. Their mythology held that the sun was a living entity that could wander, grow distant, or even escape. The ceremony performed here, likely by the Sapa Inca himself, was seen as literally tying the sun to the stone at this point of equilibrium, preventing it from drifting further away into the heavens. It was a ritual of anchoring, ensuring the sun's reliable return, the turn of the seasons, and thus the survival of all life. This transforms the Intihuatana from a mere observatory into something far more powerful, an instrument of interactive sacred engineering. It represents a philosophy where human ritual, performed at a precisely engineered point in space and time, was believed to have a direct stabilizing effect on the universe itself. The stone was the interface, the place where ceremony and celestial mechanics met to hold the world in balance. But to truly bring the cosmos indoors required an architectural act of breathtaking confidence. In the heart of ancient Rome, the Pantheon achieves this not with a narrow corridor or a framed window, but with a single, deliberate act of subtraction. Its vast coffered dome, a marvel of engineering for the ages, is crowned by a perfect open circle, the oculus. This is not a skylight in the modern sense. It is an eye to the sky, an architectural statement so bold it seems to defy logic, leaving the temple open to the very elements, yet this was its genius. The oculus rejected the idea of capturing just one solar event. Instead, it invited the entire dynamic path of the sun to become a permanent feature of the interior. Throughout the day, the beam of sunlight entering that high opening travels like a slow, celestial spotlight across the marble floor and up the curved walls. Its journey is never the same. In the height of summer, the sun is high and the beam stays close to the center of the floor, a concentrated pool of light. In the depth of winter, the sun is low and the beam stretches long and slanted, climbing high up the interior wall. This transforms the static space into a living sundial, a perpetual, immersive theater of cosmic motion. But the Roman architects, masters of both engineering and symbolism, embedded specific meaning into this daily show. Historical analysis suggests that on April 21st, the traditional founding date of Rome, the midday sun would align so perfectly that its beam would fully illuminate the grand, bronze entrance doors. In that moment, the Temple of All Gods became a monument to the city itself, bathed in the light of its own symbolic birthday. The design philosophy here represents a profound shift. Where earlier cultures built to mark a specific, fleeting moment of celestial power, the Pantheon was built to contain the sun's entire story. Rain would fall through the oculus, snow would drift in, and the moving light would mark the hours for those inside. This brought the raw, untamed cycles of the heavens directly into the realm of imperial ceremony and religious observance. To stand under that dome was to stand literally beneath the eye of heaven, with the sun and moon tracking their paths across the interior space. It was a declaration that Rome's power was not just aligned with the cosmos, but that it had built a room grand enough to hold its perpetual motion. The Pantheon teaches us that solar architecture could be as much about embracing the sun's endless journey as it was about commemorating its extreme points. But the celestial conversation did not end with the sun alone. A third, more subtle principle reveals an even deeper layer of their cosmic understanding, one that wove the fixed stars into their solar architecture. This is the principle of the heliacal rise, a phenomenon requiring patience and a profound knowledge of the night sky. Imagine a bright star like Sirius or the Pleiades that disappears into the sun's glare for several weeks each year. Its heliacal rising is the moment it finally wins that race, becoming visible for just a few fleeting minutes in the pre-dawn glow before the sun itself washes it out. This brief, annual reappearance was not just a pretty sight, it was a critical signal. In ancient Egypt, the heliacal rising of Sirius coincided almost exactly with the life-giving flood of the Nile, marking the start of their new year. For other cultures, it signaled the time to plant or to begin a harvest festival. This was a calendar event written in starlight, a precise celestial alarm clock. To encode this into stone required architects to think in layers. They had to design for a moving target, a point where the first light of the rising sun and the last gleam of a specific star would be seen together through a single architectural frame. This was not a simple alignment to a horizon point. It was a synchronization of two celestial bodies on the move. A temple might be oriented so that on one crucial morning of the year, an observer standing at a specific altar could watch Sirius, for example, sparkle directly above a distant mountain peak just as the sun's first edge broke the horizon precisely beneath it. The star and the sun would be captured in a momentary, sacred alignment, a cosmic handshake witnessed only through that engineered window. Achieving this represents a staggering leap in observational astronomy. It meant generations of priests tracking not only the sun's slow drift along the horizon, but also the precise timing of a star's return after its long absence. This knowledge had to be preserved and refined over centuries. When we find a structure with such a dual alignment, we are looking at the culmination of that long-term, sacred science. It tells us these builders did not see the sun in isolation. They perceived it as one brilliant player in a vast, interconnected celestial mechanism. The sun's journey was in dialogue with the fixed stars, and their temples and monuments were built to eavesdrop on that grand conversation, to make those hidden relationships permanently visible on Earth. This layered astronomy transforms their architecture from a solar calendar into a multidimensional map of the heavens, a testament to a vision of the cosmos where everything was connected, and every light in the sky had a story to tell and a season to announce. This custom solar event required an architectural feat of almost unimaginable scale. The entire temple complex at Abu Simbel was not built upon the land, but carved directly into a solid cliff face. To achieve the precise solar penetration, the architects had to calculate the exact angle of the sun's rays on two specific mornings of the year, then design a 60-meter-long corridor, a straight shaft through the mountain that would act as a perfect light pipe. The corridor's axis, the height of the doorway, the slope of the floor, every dimension had to be perfect. A single degree of error, and the sunbeam would miss its sacred targets entirely, falling on blank stone. This was celestial engineering on a monumental level, a testament to the Egyptian mastery of astronomy, geometry, and stonework. But the true genius lies in the symbolic choreography of light and dark that occurs in the deepest sanctuary. As the dawn sun crests the horizon on those two appointed days, a narrow beam of light races through the mountain's heart. It travels past colossal statues of Ramses II, past scenes of his military victories, finally reaching the small, sacred chamber at the very back. There, 4 statues sit in eternal stillness, 3 gods and the pharaoh himself. For about 20 minutes, the sunlight illuminates the figures of Ra-Horakhti, the sun god, Ammon, the king of the gods, and a deified Ramses II. They are bathed in radiant gold, brought to life by the sun's touch. But the 4th statue, that of Ptah, the god of the underworld and darkness, remains perpetually shrouded in shadow. He is untouched by the beam. This was no oversight, it was a profound theological statement carved in light. The carefully curated illumination told a story of divine kingship and cosmic order. It visually demonstrated that the living pharaoh, Ramses, shared space with the supreme gods in the sun's favor, while appropriately acknowledging the separate, shadowed realm of the afterlife. This transforms the temple from a static monument into a dynamic, ritual machine. Twice a year, the sun itself performed the ceremony, validating Ramses's eternal rule and his intimate connection to the celestial powers. It was the ultimate piece of political theater, authored by the pharaoh's architects and directed by the cosmos. The architecture of light was also an architecture of power. To control the calendar was to hold the very rhythm of life in your hands, dictating when to plant, when to harvest, and when the gods demanded celebration. When a ruler could not only predict a solar event but command it to unfold within a temple they had built, they were performing a kind of sacred stagecraft. It was a public demonstration that their authority was not merely human but divinely sanctioned, a direct line to the cosmic forces that govern time and fertility. Imagine the awe of a population gathered at Karnak or Chichen Itza, witnessing the sun itself obey the stone commands of their leader. In that illuminated moment, the abstract concept of divine kingship became an undeniable sensory reality. The ruler was not just interpreting the heavens, they were in conversation with them, and the architecture was the proof. This transformed these sites from passive observatories into active instruments of statecraft. The meticulously timed public ceremony, where the solstice sun lit a specific altar or the equinox shadow formed a serpent, was not just a religious festival. It was a powerful reinforcement of the social order. The event centralized authority, gathering the community at a time and place controlled by the elite. It visually reinforced the hierarchy, with the priest-king often positioned as the sole mediator between the people and the celestial phenomenon. This strategic use of celestial mechanics created a potent feedback loop. The people's faith in the cosmic order validated the ruler's power, and the rulers demonstrated control over that order deepened the people's faith. It was a brilliant form of social cohesion, where the sun's predictable, awe-inspiring power was harnessed to validate a stable, earthly system. Behind the breathtaking celestial mathematics, then, lay a layer of profound political intelligence. The stones were aligned not only to capture the sun, but to capture the hearts and minds of a civilization, binding them together under a sky that appeared to endorse their king. This profound similarity presents a tantalizing puzzle for the modern mind. How do we explain the echo of a single architectural idea, the Solstice corridor in a tomb in Ireland, a temple in Egypt, and a pyramid in Mexico? These cultures were separated by vast oceans and thousands of years with no known contact. So, did the idea travel, or was it born separately in each place? The answer likely lies in the nature of the sun itself. The fundamental problem every early society faced was identical: how to track time and predict the seasons for survival. The solution, if you watch the horizon patiently enough, becomes visible to anyone. The sun does not rise and set in a random scatter. It travels between two fixed points on the horizon, the solstice extremes. Once a community dedicates generations to marking those points with sticks or stones, the logical next step is to monumentalize that knowledge, to build a permanent house for that celestial event. This process of independent discovery, of different minds arriving at the same elegant solution to a universal problem, is a powerful testament to human ingenuity. It suggests that the language of the sun is not a secret code to be taught, but an open book to be read by any culture that looks up with patience and purpose. The straightforward solstice alignment, therefore, feels like a natural, repeatable invention, a brilliant but understandable human response to a shared cosmic rhythm. Yet within this consensus, whispers of mystery remain. It is the staggering sophistication of certain implementations that gives us pause. The multi-layered astronomy of a site like Newgrange, with its roof box engineered for a specific solar altitude, or the dual star and sun alignment suspected in some temples, feels like advanced coursework in a subject others were just learning. This complexity fuels a perennial debate. Could there have been a now-vanished thread of knowledge, a school of celestial engineering that influenced disparate corners of the ancient world? Or do these peaks of achievement simply represent the extraordinary potential of isolated genius, of cultures that devoted centuries to refining this one sacred science? The gaps in our historical record are vast and silent. What we are left with are the stones and their alignments, a silent family of structures that seem to speak the same celestial language. Whether they learned it independently or from some forgotten common source, their legacy is a unified message about our ancestors. It reveals a universal human drive not just to observe the heavens, but to build a permanent conversation with them, to anchor our fleeting lives to the timeless cycles of light. This shared architectural impulse, perhaps more than any hypothetical connection, is the true lost knowledge we are rediscovering, a reminder of a time when humanity's greatest monuments were designed not to block out the sky, but to invite it in. The astronomical alignments are only half the story. Behind every stone placed to capture the sunrise lies a second, equally staggering achievement of raw human effort. To build a covenant with the cosmos, these cultures first had to perform miracles of engineering on the ground. Consider the physical reality of a single bluestone at Stonehenge, a rock weighing several tons. Its journey began over 150 miles away in the Preseli Hills of Wales. Without draft animals or the wheel, moving these monoliths was a puzzle that demanded a communal answer. The leading theory suggests they were hauled on sledges and rollers, guided down rivers on rafts, and finally pulled overland by teams of people, a journey that could have taken years. This was not a simple construction project, it was a pilgrimage in stone, an act of devotion that physically connected the sacred landscape of the quarry to the sacred space of the circle. The labor itself became part of the ritual, binding the entire community to the celestial purpose through shared hardship and triumph. This pattern of impossible logistics repeats across the globe. High in the Andes, the Inca built Machu Picchu and sites like Sacsayhuaman with stones so massive, so perfectly fitted, that their construction methods still elude full understanding. They quarried gigantic granite blocks from mountainsides, then somehow transported them up and down precipitous slopes. Using ropes, ramps, and an immense coordinated workforce, they maneuvered these behemoths into position, shaping them with such precision that a knife blade cannot slip between the joints. The effort required to achieve this at an altitude where every breath is labored is almost incomprehensible. It speaks to a social organization of breathtaking efficiency and a collective will that viewed the work as a sacred duty. The act of building in harmony with the sun was therefore a double alignment. It required perfect celestial calculation, yes, but it also demanded perfect human coordination. The temple was not just aligned to the heavens, it was built by a society that had aligned itself entirely toward a single, transcendent goal. This monumental mobilization of labor reveals a profound truth about these projects. They were likely far more than just temples or tombs. They were the ultimate community endeavors. The decades or even centuries spent quarrying, hauling, and raising stones would have defined generations. This shared, generational effort forged a powerful social bond, turning abstract astronomical knowledge into a tangible, collective legacy. Every person who pulled on a rope or placed a stone could feel they were part of something eternal, a direct physical link to the cosmic order they were honoring. The finished structure, then, stood as a permanent record of that cooperation, a testament to what humanity could achieve when unified by a common, celestial vision. The stone that caught the solstice light did not just mark a day on a calendar, it memorialized the sweat, the song, and the shared purpose of thousands. In this way, the architectural triumph is twofold, a shrine to the intellect that decoded the sky, and a monument to the human spirit that moved mountains to build its reply. But to truly understand the stone, we must listen to the stories it was built to tell. For the architects of these monuments, the sun was never just a physical object, it was a living character in an epic celestial narrative. It was a charioteer racing across the sky, a fiery serpent descending to earth, a divine ancestor promising return from the underworld. The alignments we measure with precise angles and dates were, for them, the dramatic entrances and exits for these deities. The architecture provided the permanent stage, and the solar event was the guaranteed annual performance. This transforms a site from a mere observatory into a sacred theater, where myth became momentarily real, visible, and undeniable for everyone present. Take the example we have already seen, the serpent slithering down El Castillo. That play of light and shadow was not a clever trick. It was the literal descent of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god who brought wisdom and the calendar itself to the Maya. The pyramid was built specifically to host that divine visitation every equinox, making the myth a communal, witnessed reality. Similarly, the deep chamber of Newgrange, illuminated at the winter solstice, was not just a clever light show. It staged a story of rebirth where the sun, at its weakest point, reached into the tomb of the ancestors. This enacted a promise that life and light would always return, a narrative of hope engineered into the heart of a mountain. At Abu Simbel, the sun's beam selectively illuminating the statues wrote a theological script in light, showing the pharaoh seated alongside the gods, actively participating in the solar cycle. In each case, the alignment served a narrative purpose far beyond marking time. It was a way of embedding the culture's most important stories into the immutable laws of physics. The myth explained why the alignment mattered, and the alignment proved the myth was true. This creates a powerful loop of belief. Every year, when the sun performed as predicted, it reaffirmed the entire cosmic order as the culture understood it. It validated the priesthood's knowledge, it reinforced the ruler's divine connection, and it comforted the people with the visible, rhythmic certainty of their worldview. So when we encounter a mysterious alignment, one of the most powerful keys to deciphering it lies not only in surveying tools but in the old stories. The mythology associated with a site is often the blueprint for its design. By asking what story the sunlight was meant to tell, we shift our perspective. We stop seeing just cleverly placed stones and start reading a three-dimensional sacred text, where every corridor is a sentence, every window is a punctuation mark, and the sun itself is the reader, bringing the story to life once a year. This fusion is the ultimate goal of the ancient architect, to weld celestial mechanics, human narrative, and monumental engineering into a single, enduring expression of meaning. This silent moment of no shadow held a sacred power all its own. While many cultures celebrated the sun at the horizon, others trained their genius on its highest point in the sky. In the lands between the tropics, a unique and deeply localized phenomenon occurs. On two specific days of the year, the sun does not merely arc across the sky, it passes directly, perfectly overhead at local noon. In that instant, vertical objects cast no shadow at all. They seem to dissolve into the light. This is the Zenith passage, and for cultures like the Maya, it was not just an observation, it was the foundation of a profoundly place-based astronomy. Their entire calendar and agricultural cycle hinged on predicting these exact days, which vary depending on your precise latitude. A day that marked the zenith in one city would be off by days in another city, just a short distance north or south. This meant their solar science had to be hyper-local, perfectly calibrated to the very patch of earth beneath their temples. To capture this vertical event, they engineered specialized instruments. One of the most elegant was the Zenith tube. Archaeologists have found narrow, vertical shafts built into temple floors or palace walls, perfectly plumbed to point straight up at the sky. On the day of the Zenith passage, at the exact moment of local noon, the sun would align directly with this tube. A beam of light would fire straight down its length, illuminating the floor of a dark chamber below with a brilliant, focused circle. There were no slanted beams, no creeping shadows, just a sudden, definitive dot of light appearing where there was none before. In some sites, deep, narrow wells served the same purpose, their still water at the bottom acting as a mirror to catch the direct overhead sun. This was a calendar of pinpoint accuracy. It told the community with absolute certainty that the sun was at its peak strength directly above them, a time of immense celestial power that often signaled the coming rains, the perfect time for planting. The architectural implication is staggering. It means these builders had to know their exact position on the planet with remarkable precision. They weren't just aligning to a distant horizon, they were mapping their place in the cosmos along a north-south axis, defining their home as a specific point where the sun touched the earth directly. This zenith science created a sacred bond between the people and their land, a covenant written in a beam of vertical light that said, "Here and nowhere else, this is the moment." It represents a shift from marking the sun's journey along the edge of the world to marking its intimate relationship with the very center of their world. This vertical conversation with the sun found a perfect home high on a flattened mountaintop in Oaxaca. At the ancient Zapotec capital of Monte, Albán, architects engineered a structure that seems to turn the entire concept of a building inside out. Known as Building P, it houses one of the clearest examples of a zenith tube in the Americas. Within its walls, a narrow, perfectly vertical shaft plunges straight down from the roof into the heart of the structure. This was not a chimney or a drain, but a precision instrument aimed at the sky. Its entire purpose was to capture one specific phenomenon, the moment the sun passed directly overhead, a day that would arrive twice each year for this precise latitude. On those mornings, as the sun climbed toward its peak, anyone standing in the chamber below would watch a small, brilliant dot of light appear high up in the shaft's opening. As noon approached, that dot would grow and intensify, slowly descending the tube. Then, at the exact moment of local noon on the zenith passage day, it happened. A solid, vertical column of sunlight would fire straight down the tube's entire length, striking a marker or illuminating the chamber floor with a sudden, radiant pool of light. In that instant, the tube itself would vanish from sight within the beam, and any object within the chamber would cast no shadow at all. It was a moment of pure, geometric perfection, a silent announcement from the cosmos that the sun was exactly where it was supposed to be. The engineering tolerance for this is breathtaking. The shaft had to be constructed with absolute plumb, a true vertical, and its opening had to be perfectly aligned to the celestial coordinates of the zenith sun. Even a slight tilt would mean the beam would strike the side of the shaft and fail to reach the bottom. This was not a broad, forgiving horizon alignment. It was a needle thread of light demanding flawless execution. For the Zapotec, this event was far more than a celestial curiosity. It served as their most accurate possible calendar marker, defining the solar year with pinpoint certainty. It likely anchored their ritual cycle, with ceremonies timed to this moment of supreme solar power directly overhead. Some researchers even suggest such tubes could have been used as a master reference to calibrate the other, more common east-west alignments found throughout the city, using the absolute certainty of the vertical to check the accuracy of the horizontal. This focus on the zenith reveals a sophisticated, three-dimensional understanding of the sky. While many cultures mapped the sun's journey along the horizon, the Zapotec of Monte Albán were equally concerned with its height. Their architecture captures not just where the sun rises, but how high it climbs, acknowledging its full, arcing path through the dome of the heavens. In that dark chamber, waiting for the sudden, shadowless light, they were not just marking time, they were experiencing a direct, personal connection with the sun at the peak of its strength, a moment where heaven and earth were linked by a single, perfect thread of gold. The architects' dialogue with the sun did not end with stone alone. They understood that light's most perfect partner was its own reflection, and so they brought a third element into their celestial designs: water. In sacred complexes from the Americas to Asia, reflective pools and carefully engineered canals were not just decorative, they were active components of the solar alignment itself. A still, dark pool of water placed before a temple entrance could perform a quiet miracle. On the morning of a solstice or equinox, as the sun rose directly behind the monument, its blazing image would not only crown the structure but also appear perfectly mirrored in the water below. This created a breathtaking double spectacle: the real sun and the temple above, joined with their shimmering reflection below, effectively completing a celestial circle. It amplified the power of the moment, making the architecture appear to float between two worlds, the solid realm of Earth and the fluid, inverted realm of the sky. The effect was more than visual poetry, it was deep symbolism in action. Water was life, fertility, and purification. By fusing the sun's light with its reflective surface, the architects were visually uniting the ultimate source of energy with the ultimate source of sustenance. It told a story of cosmic interdependence where the sun's power was not just observed, but was shown to be generative, calling forth the waters that nourished the crops and the people. This integration showed a holistic vision where the environment was not a backdrop to be cleared, but a palette to be used. A natural depression could be transformed into a sacred lake. A seasonal stream could be channeled into a straight ceremonial canal. On the day of an equinox, for instance, a long, narrow canal oriented east-west would catch the entire path of the rising or setting sun, transforming into a literal river of fire, a molten pathway of light leading directly to the temple doors. This manipulation of landscape and hydrology reveals an ambition that went beyond marking a date. It was about creating an immersive sensory experience where every element, the warmth on your skin, the stone under your feet, the dazzling reflection in your eyes, conspired to convince you of a sacred truth. The cosmos was not distant, it was right here, dancing in the interplay of light and liquid, forever captured in the architect's masterful blend of calculation and artistry. Decoding these silent stone conversations requires a modern interpreter, a discipline born from the marriage of starlight and scholarship. This field is archaeoastronomy, a meticulous detective agency where the tools are no longer gnomons and string, but theodolites, satellite imagery, and complex three-dimensional software. Its mission is to listen to what the stones are saying about the sky, separating celestial intention from simple coincidence with scientific rigor. A modern researcher standing at a site like Newgrange doesn't just wait for the winter solstice, they first calculate. They must account for a subtle but crucial factor known as axial precession, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis over a cycle of 26,000 years. This means the solstice sunrise point on the horizon today is not exactly where it was 5,000 years ago. By plugging precise dates into simulation software, an archaeoastronomer can rewind the sky, visualizing exactly where the sun would have risen from that spot millennia ago. Only then can they determine if the roof box was designed for that ancient sunrise, confirming a breathtaking level of foresight. This process turns speculation into evidence. What might look like a random window in a wall, when analyzed through this corrected celestial lens, often reveals itself as a deliberate aperture for a star's heliacal rise or a planet's standstill. The data provides a powerful check against our own imaginations, ensuring we see the builder's actual achievements, not our own projected wonders. Yet, the science of angles is only half the equation. True understanding demands a second, more delicate tool, cultural empathy. An alignment that seems to point to a bright star might have held meaning not for that star itself, but for the dark space beside it, a constellation of darkness in the culture's mythology. A zenith tube's perfect verticality might be less about calendar precision and more about creating a portal for ancestral spirits to travel. This is where anthropology meets astronomy. The modern decoder must immerse themselves in the fragments of myth, ritual texts, and iconography left behind, interpreting the hard data through the soft lens of the builder's worldview. It is a constant reminder that we are not just measuring stones against stars, we are translating a lost language of meaning. A successful archaeoastronomer, therefore, walks a careful line. They wield the laser rangefinder to prove the intentionality of the alignment, but they then set it down to ask, what story did this alignment tell? What fear did it soothe? What power did it legitimize? What cycle of life did it celebrate? This dual approach transforms a site from a puzzle of geometry into a chapter of human experience. It builds the essential bridge, allowing us to read their celestial blueprints not as cold engineering schematics, but as the profound and hopeful maps of a universe they believed they could converse with, one perfectly timed sunbeam at a time. Yet for every breathtaking alignment, a critical question must be asked. Was this truly their intention, or is it a beautiful accident we are seeing through the lens of time? This is the central, necessary tension within archaeoastronomy, the line between celestial design and random chance. With thousands of ancient structures spread across the globe and 365 sunrises and sunsets each year, the pure mathematics of coincidence cannot be ignored. Statistically, if you measure enough doorways and corridors against enough points on the horizon, some will appear to align perfectly with a solar event simply by random chance. Critics of more speculative alignments point to this selection effect, where we enthusiastically highlight the one window that catches the solstice sun, while ignoring the 99 others in the same complex that point to blank sky. It is a vital caution, a reminder that our desire to find meaning can sometimes outpace the evidence. The rigorous response to this challenge lies in the strength of multiple, converging lines of proof. A single alignment might be intriguing, but it is rarely conclusive. The strongest cases are built like a legal argument, where the evidence clusters overwhelmingly around intentional design. Look for a site where not one, but several independent architectural features align to significant solar or lunar events, like a main corridor for the winter solstice sunrise, a window for the equinox sunset, and an altar positioned for a zenith passage. This pattern of multiple, coordinated alignments within a single structure makes the odds of random chance plummet dramatically. Next, examine the architecture itself. Does the feature in question have a clear, practical purpose if it is not a sighting device? A narrow, meticulously carved shaft that serves no apparent function as a drain, a vent, or a structural element, yet points precisely to a star's rising, begins to look very much like a crafted instrument. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, seek the cultural testimony. Does the local mythology speak of a sun god entering a temple on a specific day? Do historical records or ancestral stories describe ceremonies timed to a particular light effect? When the hard geometry of the stones matches the soft poetry of the stories, the case for intention becomes compelling. This ongoing debate is not a weakness of the field, but its greatest strength. It forces a discipline rooted in wonder to also embrace rigorous skepticism. The result is a more honest, more awe-inspiring understanding. It means that when we stand in a chamber and watch the solstice sun arrive, we are not just witnessing a pretty trick of the light, but are far more likely to be participating in a moment of genuine, millennia-old dialogue, a conversation between human ingenuity and the cosmos that was carefully, deliberately, and brilliantly engineered. The stones may be silent, but their wisdom is speaking louder than ever in our own time. Those ancient architects who aligned their temples to the sun were not only mapping the heavens, they were mastering a form of energy efficiency that we are only now fully appreciating. Their pursuit of celestial harmony has found a powerful echo in the modern movement of sustainable design, where the core principles are strikingly familiar. This is passive solar architecture, a concept that feels both cutting-edge and deeply ancient. It harnesses the sun's path not for ritual, but for comfort and conservation, using nothing more than a building's intelligent placement and materials. A modern home designed with passive solar principles will have its longest wall and largest windows facing true south in the northern hemisphere to soak up the low, warming winter sun. Its roof will have a wide overhang calculated so that when the summer sun is high and hot, that overhang casts a cooling shadow over those same windows. The floor or an interior wall might be made of dense materials like concrete or brick, acting as a thermal mass that absorbs the sun's heat by day and gently releases it through the cool night. This is not high technology, it is applied celestial geometry, the direct descendant of placing a stone to mark a solstice shadow. The goal has shifted from demonstrating divine power to reducing our carbon footprint, but the foundational intelligence is identical. Work with the sun's natural cycle, do not fight against it. We even see a revival of the ancient desire to mark meaningful dates with light. While few modern office buildings are built for a deity's annual descent, architects sometimes weave personal or cultural narratives into their designs with solar events. A university library might be oriented so that on the institution's founding day, a beam of sunlight illuminates its ceremonial seal. A private residence could be designed so that on the homeowner's birthday, the sunrise aligns perfectly with a central hallway. These are conscious choices that reconnect our living spaces to the rhythm of the year, transforming a house from a shelter into a personal sundial. They continue the timeless human tradition of seeking a tangible, annual connection between our stories and the larger story of the cosmos, proving that the impulse to build meaning with light never truly faded. Looking back at the master builders of antiquity, we are not just studying history, we are rediscovering a lost user manual for living well on this planet. Their alignment with the sun was a holistic act, blending the spiritual, the practical, and the social into a single stone sentence. They understood that the most elegant solution often came from observing and cooperating with nature's existing systems. In an age confronting the consequences of ignoring those systems, their legacy offers a profound lesson. By studying how they captured specific solar events, we are reminded that true innovation is sometimes about recovering a deeper, older pattern. Their work points us toward a future where our buildings are not just places to live, but active participants in a sustainable relationship with the energy that surrounds us. The green buildings of tomorrow, with their smart orientations and light-harvesting atriums, are in a very real sense the spiritual successors to the great solar temples. They complete a circle, showing that the ancient quest to harmonize with the sun was perhaps the most practical form of wisdom ever carved in stone. That unified language speaks in a grammar of light and shadow, a syntax written not in words but in the precise angles of stone. It tells us that for our ancestors, building was never a single act. It was a layered discipline, a sacred craft where the roles of astronomer, engineer, priest, and ruler were often woven into one breathtaking vision. The final alignment we witness at a temple entrance is the culmination of this multidimensional practice, the last line of a complex equation solved across generations. At its foundation was empirical observation, a patient, lifelong study of the sky's patterns, recorded not in books but in memory and song, refined by each successive keeper of the calendar. This hard-won data then had to be translated into a physical form, a task that demanded monumental engineering. It required moving mountains of stone, solving problems of weight and balance, and shaping materials with a precision that still baffles us, all to create a stage that would not shift for millennia. Yet the stone alone was mute. Its voice came from the deep mythology that gave it purpose, the stories of gods and ancestors that explained why this particular alignment mattered, transforming a beam of light into a divine visitation or a promise of rebirth. And finally, there was the astute political intelligence that understood how to channel this celestial spectacle into social cohesion, using the awe of the sun's obedience to validate authority and unite a community under a shared cosmic story. This was the complete system. They were not merely marking a date on a horizon, they were building a machine to make the cosmic tangible. The immense, impersonal journey of our star was brought down to the human scale, to the feeling of warmth on your face inside a stone corridor on the winter solstice, to the collective gasp as a serpent of shadow descended a pyramid stair. In that moment, the abstract became experiential. The distant sun became a participant in human ritual. Whether the practical goal was to signal the planting season, to facilitate worship, or to consolidate earthly power. The underlying achievement was the same, the creation of a permanent dialogue. These structures are frozen conversations between humanity and the heavens, each stone a carefully chosen word in a sentence meant to last forever. They stand as a profound challenge to our modern assumptions, asking us to shed the notion of the primitive past. When we look at the roof box of Newgrange or the Zenith tube of Monte Albán, we are not looking at superstition made solid. We are looking at the work of brilliant scientist artists who used the very landscape as their canvas and the sun itself as their pigment. Their medium was mountain and mesa, their brushstroke was the calculated placement of mass, and their masterpiece was the capture of a fleeting celestial event, holding it in place for all eternity. This is their enduring gift, not a lost technology to be recovered, but a timeless perspective to be remembered, that our greatest buildings are those that do not shut out the sky, but that invite its eternal rhythms inside. This global tapestry of ingenuity reveals a fundamental truth about the human spirit. Across every culture and continent, our ancestors shared a common impulse to build markers of meaning into the landscape, transforming silent observation into a monumental conversation. The solstitial beam at Newgrange, the equinoxial serpent at Chichen Itza, the zenith tube at Monte Albán, these are not isolated curiosities. They are chapters in a single, sprawling story of how humanity learned to speak the language of the sky. What we have witnessed is more than ancient engineering. It is the birth of a sacred science, where practical need for a calendar seamlessly merged with a profound reverence for the cosmic order. These architects did not see a division between the temple and the observatory, between the ritual and the calculation. In their world, these were one and the same, a unified practice where understanding the sun's path was the highest form of worship and the surest foundation for community. They encoded their hard-won knowledge into the very bones of the earth, creating a legacy that has weathered not just storms, but the rise and fall of civilizations themselves. This legacy challenges our modern compartmentalized view of the world. It reminds us of a time when art, science, spirituality, and governance were woven into a single, coherent vision, all oriented toward harmonizing human life with the grand celestial cycles. Their silent stones ask us to look up again, not just with the eyes of astronomers, but with the hearts of those who sought a tangible connection to the infinite. Their enduring quest to find a place in the cosmos continues in us, in our own searches for meaning and our own efforts to build a sustainable future in rhythm with our world. If this journey through light and stone has illuminated new perspectives for you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to continue exploring history's greatest mysteries with us as we keep listening to the stories the past has yet to finish telling.